Everybody having a good afternoon so far? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in between. That's what I like to see. Okay, well, thumbs in between are okay. All right, so this afternoon, we are going to continue reading our book that we started last week. We are reading How to Train Your Dragon. And this week, I was able to get it on my Kindle. I borrowed it from the public library so I can show you guys the pages a little better. So I am going to change the screen so that you guys can see the book. All right. So here we go. Let's see if Miss Walker can do it. All right. Feel free if you want to. You can click your cameras off. Be sure your microphones stay off.
What you doing? You can't be in this.
All right. Here we go. Let's see. All right. Let me switch my screen.
Apple gone.
All right. Give me a thumbs up. Can you see the book, How to Train Your Dragon, on my screen? Could you see it? All right. Great. Nice to see you, Chalamus. All right. Awesome. Okay. I'm going to switch back. Now, we are on, as I recall, let's see, we are on chapter 3, as I recall. So let me click through our pages here to get us there. Let's see. Well, let's see. Okay, we did that one we'd read. Let's see. Hold on. I have my real book that has the page I need in it. We need page 31. So 36.
I'll be back.
Okay, here we are. I think. Nope. We read chapter 2. Eventually, Miss Walker will find it. There we are. Heroes or Exiles is the name of our chapter. The boys scrambled over the slimy pebbles at the edge of the beach, back up Madman's Gully. The gorge they had climbed through a couple hours before was now a narrow crack in the cliffs filled with large rocks. They tried to move as quickly as they could, but this was difficult when you are slipping and sliding over huge stones covered in ice, because remember, it's winter there. They had made painfully slow progress. A dragon that hadn't been put off by the snow came shrinking down into the gorge. He landed on Warthog's back and started savaging him, sinking fangs into Warthog's shoulder and ripping red lines into his arms. Gobber bashed the dragon on the nose with the handle of his axe, and the dragon let go and flapped away. But a whole wave of dragons replaced him, pouring into the canyon with awful raspy cries, fire shooting from their nostrils and melting the snow before them. Talons spread wickedly as they swooped downward. Gobber stood legs wide apart and whirled his big double-headed axe. He threw back his great hairy head and yelled a terrible primeval yell that echoed down the sides of the gorge and made the hairs on the back of Hiccup's neck stand straight up like spines on the sea urchin. See our dragons up here? Individually, the dragons tended to have a healthy sense of self-preservation, but they were braver if they hunted in packs. They knew now that they had advantage of the massive numbers, so they didn't check their flying, for instance. They just kept on coming. Gobber let go of the axe, spinning from end to end. The axe soared through the falling snow with hit the biggest dragon of the lot, killing him instantly, and then kept going, landing on soft snow drifts feet away and disappearing. This made the rest of the dragons think a bit. Some of them scrambled all over each other in their haste to fly away, yelping like dogs. Others came to a halt, hovering uncertainly, and screaming defiance, but keeping their distance. Waste of a good axe, grunted Gobbler. Keep going, boys. They could come back. Hiccup needed no more encouragement to keep going. As soon as they got out of the gorge into the mushy land behind, he broke into a stumbling run, every now and then flying flat on his face in the snow. Some time later, when Gobbler reckoned they were in a safe distance from the wild dragon cliff, he yelled to the boys to stop. Very carefully, he counted heads again to check that he hadn't lost anybody. Gobbler had spent an unpleasant 10 minutes standing at the mouth of the dragon's cave, wondering why there was such a terrible racket and what he was going to say to stalk up the vast if he lost his precious son and heir for good. Something tactful and sensitive, he supposed, but tact and sensitivity were not Gobbler's strong points. He took the first 5 minutes to come up with Hiccup copped it, sorry, but then spent the second 5 minutes tearing his beard out. So consequently, even though secretly mightily relieved, he was not in a good mood, and as soon as he could get his breath back, he exploded all over the place, and the boys shivered violently as the bed waggled line. Never in 14 years have I come across such a load of hopeless barnacles as you lot. Which of you mollusks is responsible for waking up the dragons? I was sick, hiccup, which wasn't strictly true. Oh, that's brilliant, bellowed Gobbler. Just brilliant. Our future leader shows off his magnificent leadership skills at the tender age of 10 and a half, and he does his best to annihilate himself and the rest of you in a simple military exercise. Snoutlout sneered. You find something amusing about that, Snoutlout? Asked Gobber. With the dangerous softness, everybody is on limit rations for the next 3 weeks. The boys groaned. Smart work, Hiccup, sneered Snoutlout. I can't wait to see what you in action on the battlefield. Silence, Gobber yelled. This is your initiation, not the day in the country. Silence, or you'll be lunching on lugworms for the rest of your lives. Now, continued Gobbler more calmly, although that was an absolute mess, it wasn't a total disaster. I presume that all of you have a dragon after that fiasco. Yes, chorused the boys. Fish legs took a sideways glance at Hiccup, who was staring straight ahead. Lucky for you, said Gobbler ominously. So, you have passed the first part of the dragon test. There are, however, still two parts you have to complete before you can become full members of the tribe. Your next task will be to train this dragon yourself. This will be a test of the force of your personality. You will assert your will over this wild creature and show it who is master. Your dragon will be expected to obey simple commands such as go and stay and hunt for fish with you the way dragons have hunted for sons of Thor since anybody can remember. If you are worried about training a dragon, you should study the book called How to Train Your Dragon by Professor Hobblish, which you will find in the fireplace of the great hall. Suddenly, Gobber looked very pleased with himself. I stole that book from the Meathead Public Library myself, he said modestly, regarding his very black fingernails, right from under the nose of the hairy, scary librarian. He never noticed such a thing, and that's burglary for you. Hogwarts put up his hand. What happens if we can't read, sir? No boasting, Warthog, boomed Goomer. Get some idiot to read it to you. Dragons will begin to go back to sleep because this is still their hibernation time. Some of the dragons had indeed gone very quiet inside their baskets. So take them home, find a warm place. They should wake up in the next couple of weeks. You will then have 4 months to prepare for initiation day at Thor's Thursday celebration, final part of your test. If on that day you can prove you have trained your dragon to the satisfaction of myself and the elders of the tribe, you can finally call yourself a Hoodlinburg. The boys stood very tall and tried to look like proper hooligans. Heroes or exiles, yelled Gobbler for the belt. Heroes or exiled, yelled 8 boys frantically back at him. Exile, thought Hiccup and Fishleg sadly. I hate being a Viking, panted Fishlegs to Hiccup as they stumbled back through the bracken towards the hooligan village. Oh, you didn't really walk on the island of Burke. You waited. though hither or blackened mud or snow which clung to your legs and made it difficult to lift. It was the sort of country where the sea and the land were always falling into one another and getting mixed up. The island was a shot through with holes burrowed by the water and the maze of cross creaking underground streams. You could put your foot on solid piece of grass and find yourself disappearing into thick, thigh high, black, icky mud. You could be making your way through the ferns and suddenly find yourself forging a river waist high of icy cold water. The boys were already soaked to the skin with seawater, and now the snow had turned into horizontal driving rain, blowing in their faces with the strength of the one gale force winds and always shrieking across the salty wastelands of Burke. A narrow escape from horrible death, the first thing on Thursday morning, exclaimed Fishlegs, followed by the complete rejection by the junior half tribe. Nobody's going to talk to me for years after this, except you, of course, Hiccup. But then you're just as a weirdo like me. Thank you, said Hiccup. And on top of everything, continued Fishlegs bitterly, a 2 mile run carrying a deranged dragon on my back. The basket of Fishlegs' back was plunging wildly from side to side as a dragon inside tried manically to get out, and the only dinner of horrible lippets to look forward to ended. Hiccup agreed that it hadn't wasn't a delicious prospect. You have this dragon back if you like, Hiccup. I warn you, they're filthy heavy and they're wet and angry. Fishlegs said miserably. Gobber is going to go off like a typhoon when he finds out you haven't got a dragon. But I have got one, said Hiccup. Fishlegs stopped and began to take the basket off his back. I know it is yours, really, he sighed. I think I'm going to go straight past the village and keep on running until I reach somewhere civilized. Rome's, perhaps. I've always wanted to go to Rome, and I haven't got a hope in Valhalla of passing initiation anyway, so no, I've got another one in my basket, Hiccup insisted. Fishlegs dropped his jaw in disbelief. I went back into the tunnel, exclaimed Hiccup. Well, blister my barnacles, said Fishlegs. How in Thor's name did you know it was there? It was so dark you couldn't see the horns in front of you. It was weird, said Hiccup. I sort of sensed it when we were running down the tunnel. I couldn't see anything, but as we were passing, I knew it was a dragon there. It was meant to be my dragon. I was going to ignore it, actually, because we were in a bit of a hurry. And when you said about not having a dragon, I went back and there it was, lying on a shelf in the tunnel, just as I imagined it would be. Well, jigger my jellyfish, Fishleg said. The boy started running again. Hiccup was bruised all over, shaking from the shock, and he had a nasty dragon wound on his calf, which was stinging like crazy from the salt water. He was freezing cold, and there was the irritating bit of seaweed in one of his sandals. He also was a bit worried because he knew he never should have risked his life trying to get a
I
dragon
don't
for
hear
fish
you.
leg. This was not an act of the Viking hero. A Viking hero would not intervene between fish legs and his fate. On the other hand, Hiccup had been worrying about dragon catching day for longer than he could remember, and he had been sure he would be the only one that would come back without a dragon, and the shame and embarrassment and the awful exile that would follow. And now, here he was, Viking warrior with a dragon. So, on the whole, he was feeling pretty pleased about himself. Things were looking up. I've didn't turn the page and I kept reading. All right, let's see. Everybody still good? Thumbs up, can still hear me? Can you hear me? All right, thank you. All right, good. All right, Henry, be sure you typed in hi in the chat box for me. All right, so I know you're here. All right, awesome. Okay, I'm going to switch my screen back so we can finish the chapter. Here we go. You know, Hiccup. You know, Hiccup, that and fish legs are. Ugh. You know, Hiccup, Fishleg said a little later, as the wooden fortifications of the village appeared on the horizon. That sounds like fate. You're sensing a dragon there like that. This could be meant to be. You could have the sort of wonder dragon there is. Something like the monstrous nightmare look like a flying frog. You are the son and heir of Chief Stockup, after all, and it's about time fate came in with a sign about your destiny. The boy stopped, puffing from exhaustion. Oh, I'm sure it's just a common or garden that wandered away from the nest, said Hiccup, trying to sound careless and able to keep his excitement out there of his voice. Could he have something marvelous in there? Maybe an old Wiki was right. Old Ricky was Hiccup's grandfather on his mother's side. He had taken up soothsaying in his old age, and he kept on telling Hiccup how he'd looked into the future and that Hiccup was destined for great things. This amazing dragon could be the beginning of his transformation from the ordinary old Hiccup, who wasn't particularly good at anything, into the hero of the future, he thought. Hiccup took the basket off his back and paused before opening it. It's very still, isn't it? Said Fishleg suddenly, certain that it of the fate theory. I mean, it isn't moving at all in there. Are you sure it's alive? It could be very deeply asleep, said Hiccup. It was stone cold when I picked it up. Suddenly, he had a strong feeling that the gods were on his side. He knew that this dragon was alive. With trembling fingers, Hiccup undid the latch and took the lid off the basket and peered in. Fish legs joined him. Things weren't looking so good anymore. There, curled fast asleep in the bottom of the basket, was a tangled dragon knot. Lay there was the most common or garden dragon Hiccup had ever seen. And the words around the picture say, the most extraordinary thing about this dragon was how small it was. Absolutely, the only extraordinary thing about this dragon was how extraordinarily small it was. In this, it was truly extraordinary. Most dragons that Vikings used for hunting purposes were about the size of a Labrador retriever. Adolescent dragons and the boys were collecting weren't quite that big, but they were nearly fully grown. This dragon was more comparable to a West Highland terrier. Hiccup couldn't think how he'd overlooked this when he picked the dragon up in the tunnel. He supposed miserably that rather than pressured moment that with 3,000 dragons trying to kill him at a time, the dragon in the deep sleep coma do tend to weigh more than they do when they're awake. Well, said Hiccup at last, it's a sign, if you like. You reach for a deadly nabber, and what do you get? A basic brown. I grab a dragon in the dark, and what do I get? A commoner garden. The thing is, gods are telling us we're commoner garden folks, Fishleg, you and I, we're not meant to be heroes. It doesn't matter about me, said Fishleg. But you are meant to be a hero, remember? Son of the chief and all. And you will be one. I know you will. Fish legs put the basket back on Hiccup's back, and they trudged towards the village gates together. At least, I sincerely hope you will. I don't want to be following Snoutloud into battle. You've got more ideas about military tactics in your little finger than Snoutloud has in his whole fat head. While that may be true, not only was Hiccup not about to be the future star of dragon training, but with this particular dragon, it was even going to be more difficult for him to take his familiar place fading into the background. It was so small, it was going to make him look ridiculous. It was so small that Snoutlout was going to have some very unpleasant things to say about it. Chapter 4: How to Train Your Dragon. All right, guys. We are going to go ahead and start chapter 4. How to train your dragon. Ha ha ha. Snoutlout was laughing so hard that he hadn't managed to say anything at all. The boys were hanging in the village gates, taking the opportunity to show off the dragons they had caught. Hiccup had tried to walk through without being noticed, but Snoutlout had stopped him. See Snoutlout laughing and the other boys laughing. Let's see that pathetic creature Hiccup has got, said Snoutlout, and he took off the lid. Oh, this is brilliant. Look at it, said Snoutlout, when he finally got his breath laughing. What is it, Hiccup? A brown bunny with wings? A flower fairy? A fluffy flying frog? Rather, gather everybody around to see the magnificent animal our future leader has taught himself. Oh, Hiccup, you are useless, crowded Spidfast. You're the son of this chief. For Thor's sake, why didn't you get one of those new monstrous nightmares with the 6-foot wingspan and extra extendable claws? They're mean killers, they are. I have one, grinned Snoutlight, gesturing towards the terrifying looking red flame animal fast asleep in his basket. I think I shall call her Fireworm. What are you going to call yours, Hiccup? Sweetums, Sugar Lips, Baby Face? Hiccup's dragon took this particular moment to give a huge yawn, opening his tiny mouth wide to reveal a forked tongue with pink gums and absolutely no teeth at all. Snoutlout laughed so hard, Spreadfest had to hold him upright. Toothless, cried Snoutlout. Hiccup found himself the only toothless dragon in this uncivilized world. This is too good. Hiccup the useless and his dragon toothless. Fishlegs leapt to Hiccup's defense. Well, you were not allowed that monstrous nightmare that you've got, Snot-faced Snoutlout. Only the son of the chief is allowed monstrous nightmare. That fireworm dragon is Hiccup's by right. Snoutlout's eyes narrowed. He grabbed Fishleg's arm and twisted it viciously behind his back. Nobody's listening to you, you plank-hearted, fish-legged disaster area, sneered Snoutlout. Thanks to you, you sniveling, sneezing disability, the whole military operation was a total disaster. When I'm chief of this tribe, the first thing I'm going to do is boot anybody with the pathetic allergy like yours straight into exile. You're not fit to be a hooligan. Fishlegs went white in the face, but still managed to gasp out. But you're not going to be chief of this tribe. Hiccup is going to be chief of the tribe. Snoutlout dropped Fishlegs and advanced menacingly on Hiccup. Oh, is he? Is he? Sneered Snoutlout. I'm not allowed that monstrous nightmare, am I? Our future leader is keeping quiet about it, isn't he? Come on, Hiccup. I'm stealing your inheritance. What are you going to do about it? The boys all looked solemn. Snoutlout really had broken an ancient Viking rule. Hiccup, you should challenge you for your dragon, Fishleg said slowly. Everybody swirled around, looking expectant at Hiccup. Oh, brilliant, muttered Hiccup under his breath. Thank you, Fishlegs. My day just keeps getting better and better. Snoutlout was a brute of a boy who didn't really need Doc's breath's help when it came to bashing people up. He wore specifically constructed bronze tipped sandals in order to cause maximum damage when kicking people. Hiccup tried to stay out of his way as much as he could, but he couldn't ignore the insult to his status. Now that Fishlegs had helpfully pointed it out without looking like a coward in front of the other boys. And if you were known to be a coward in the hooligan tribe, you might as well go to the whole hog and wear the pink pale jerkin, take up playing the harp, and change your name to Edeltune. I challenge you, snot-faced Snoutlout, for the dragon fireworm, who is mine by right, said Hiccup, trying to hide his reluctance and speaking loudly and formally in his challenge. I accept your challenge, said Snoutlout Superfast, grinning over his horrible smug face. Axes or fists? Fists, Hiccup said, because axes were a really bad idea. I shall look forward to showing you how a real future hero fights, says Snoutlout, and then he remembered something. After the initiation thing on Thor's Thursday, though. I don't want to stub my toe or anything while I'm kicking you around the village. Hiccup might win, Fishlegs pointed out. Of course he wouldn't win, boasted Stoutlout. Look at my sporting ability, my Viking courage, my capabilities for mindless violence. I shall win just as surely as I shall be chief tribe one day. I mean, look at my dragon and then look at his dragon, he said mockingly. The gods have spoken. It's only a matter of time. In the meantime, Snoutlout carried on, I shall live in fear of being gummed to death by Hiccup's terrifying toothless terrapin. Snoutlout snauntered off in the lordly fashion, giving Hiccup a nasty kick in the shins as he did so. Sorry about the challenge, Fishlegs apologized as they left with their baskets with the dragons as they under their beds at their homes. Oh, don't worry about it, said Hiccup. Somebody would have gotten me to do it anyway. Do you know they love to fight? Fishlegs and Hiccups were going to the Great Hall to look at the book Gobbler had recommended, How to Train Your Dragon by Professor Yelvish. As it happens, confided Hiccup, I know a bit about dragons already, but I haven't the foggiest clue about training one. I would have to say they were virtually untrainable. I'm really looking forward to getting some tips. The Great Hall was a hullabaloo of young barbarians fighting and yelling and playing the popular Viking game Bushy Ball. This was a very violent contact sports with lots of contacts and very few rules. Hiccup and Fishlegs found the book tucked away in the fireplace, particular or practically in the fire. Hiccup had never noticed it before. He opened the book. I have included a basic replica of How to Train Your Dragon by Professor Yadish here in order you can share the experience with Hiccup opening the book the first time. I full of hope, interest, and expectation. You will have to imagine the cover was unusually thick with its gold clasps, and there some scribe had covered it with elaborately fancy glittering letters. It looked very inviting indeed. So here's the cover of the book, and it says, How to Train Your Dragon by Professor Yobish. Big Axe Books, 10th anniversary, winner of the Best Books for Barbarian's Gold Award. So when you turn the page, it says, This book is dedicated to mommy and with love of your dearest Yob. And then it's got the copyright information on it. And at the bottom, it says, Beowulf is softly come here and say I don't know. So here's the inside cover. A note about the author. It's talking to us about the author. His Professor Yoblich, he spent many years observing wild dragons in their natural habitat. This book is a culmination of his research and is a definitive textbook on the subject of these fascinating creatures. Professor Yoblich lives alone in a cave on the Isle of Doom and is the author of Looking After Your Killer Whale and Sharks and Other Pets. He's currently writing about butterflies. Chapter 1, at last. The golden rule training your dragon is to yell at it, and the louder the better. The end. How would you train a dragon? Look inside for all the answers in Professor Yobish's hugely entertaining and informative book. Follow his simple advice to give you your way of becoming a hero you've always wanted to be. And then there's some more information about the book. Now back to our story. What is it? Said Hiccup fiercely, turning the book upside down and shaking it, trying to see whether there was anything other than a single page of paper inside. Hiccup put the book down, his face unusually grim. Okay, fish legs, unless you're better at yelling than I am, we're on our own. We're going to have to work out our own method of dragon training. And that brings us to chapter 5, The Chat with Old Rinky. And the picture for it is Stoik the Vast. And we will stop right there, guys. I hope I will see you back here on Wednesday and we will begin chapter 5.